Welcome to The Other Side, Mississippi Today's political podcast. The Other Side lets you hear directly from the most connected players and observers across the spectrum of politics in Mississippi. From breaking news to political strategy to interviews with candidates and elected officials, we'll bring you facts, perspectives, and context that helps you cut through the noise and understand all sides of the story.
I'm Taylor Vance, the junior political reporter here at Mississippi Today. And joined with me is my colleague, the senior political reporter, Bobby Harrison. Bobby, how are you?
The old political reporter. Hey, Taylor, how you doing?
I'm good.
Taylor, before we get started, you had some big Medicaid stories last week that we're not going to talk about them today. But yeah. I would urge people that hadn't to come to go to our website and read them and take a look at them. That's a big issue. But today we're going to talk about education funding.
Right.
Yeah.
It feels like we've been talking about Medicaid for weeks now, and we thought it would be good to give our listeners a little bit of a break to discuss another very, very easy topic, which is education.
Another important topic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So today we're pleased to have Representative Kent McCarty with us. He represents House District 101, which includes Lamar County, City of Hattiesburg. He is the vice chairman of the House Education Committee. And most importantly, he is the architect of the pending legislation to rewrite the K-12 public education funding formula. It is known as the Inspire Act. So, Representative McCarty, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for having me on.
Yeah. So, I think maybe the best place to start is you have been involved in education policy, really, I think, ever since you got to the legislature, since you were elected to the House. Why is education policy something that you gravitate toward?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly since I got here, this has been pretty much what I've worked on. My family, everybody pretty much in my family besides my dad, has worked in education in some capacity. My mom is currently a principal. She's actually retiring. Congratulations, Mom, if you're listening to this. She's retiring this year, so after almost 30 years working in Lamar County School District, she's finally going to go to the House. But I've grown up around it, just immersed in education, and it's just something I'm really passionate about to move the state forward. I think it's what we got to focus on to move Mississippi forward.
Well, maybe we should talk about PERS instead of education funding.
Let's definitely not talk about PERS. I have spent plenty of time talking about PERS the last week or so with my mom and otherwise, so let's not do that.
Kent, some people think I've been critical of your formula, and I guess to a certain extent I have. But I've tried to be nuanced and said that your work and I think it's crucial for people to understand. You're served in a special election, so you were a little bit in a previous term. But to handle such major legislation at your tenure in the legislature is noteworthy in itself. But I tried to be nuanced in that the plan has a lot of good features that would I think improve the school districts. But the issue for a lot of people, a lot of public education folks, is the fact that there's no objective formula to determine how much money to go to the school districts. Why did y'all leave that out? I mean, we've had an objective formula going back to first we had the old minimum education program started in 52, then the adequate education program started in 97. And, a lot of people thought Mississippi doesn't do a lot right in education. That was one thing they did right, even though the legislature didn't fulfill its responsibility in most of those years. What was the thinking there?
Well, I think you kind of alluded to a little bit in your question. We've had this objective formula for a really long time, and we don't really follow it. And so, we could have gone in and put all this in on the front end and really stressed about that. But at the end of the day, the legislature appropriates the money it appropriates. And so we focused on where is that money we appropriate going to go. And that's really what Inspire seeks to fix within, or correct within MAP, is that the distribution is really not that equitable. If you really look at it based on districts that are high need and districts that aren't, it's really not that equitable of a distribution. So what we wanted to fix is that problem, so that no matter what the front end input was, the output went to the schools that needed it the most. So, I mean, the other thing that I'll say to that, I mean, we don't have an objective, this formula on the front end that everybody talks about, but this front end number is based on the objective number that we've gotten to this point. I think you've talked about this in your reporting. So it's not like we just pulled a we've been allocating this amount, and we just cut it in half and said we're going to say it's $3,000. I mean, we chose a number that's roughly in line with where we're funding schools now, and then set an inflation factor to it. So again, we have that in there to ease the concerns of, well, if we set this objective, we set this number in statute now, it'll never increase. Well, we have it fixed to where it will, because of inflation and things like that. That base unit cost number is still going to grow. So it's not, there's, I think, a misconception that we've chosen this number and that the legislation just says every year the legislature is going to come and set a new number. And that's not what it says at all. It actually says it will be a minimum of this amount. And then, so meaning it can never fall below that amount. And then in every year that there's inflation, it'll be after the third year, there'll be an inflation adjustment that's roughly in line with how the MAP inflation component works now. So again, I mean, I understand the point, but I just don't think, for all intents and purposes, it makes a difference on the end.
I want to get you to explain the formula, but before we do that, let me ask you one more question. Then I promise we'll just let you
ask away.
Go into the details of the formula, which I think are important. Why can't you do both? Why can't you correct those inequities that you say are in MAP? And I think there are some inequities, partially because the legislature MAP has become such a political issue that legislature has refused to just kind of address those issues through the years that a lot of people saw as issues that needed to be addressed. But why could you not address those issues and at the same time, as you said you want to do, but at the same time keep that some type of objective formula? You wouldn't even have to call it MAEP. Just you could call it the Taylor Vance education formula.
That would probably lose a lot of it. That'd be dead on arrival.
I'm trying to get legislation passed. I'm not going to go with that one.
And survive a governor's veto.
That's right. I don't think we can do both of those with that name. No, but I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I'm not saying that I'm even against looking at that. And I think if that's something that, as we move through the process, the Senate wants to bring some of that into this, I think we're open to that. I don't think that that's a reason to throw the bill out or to even criticize the bill, just because, again, we could have whatever formula we want on the front end. If we don't follow it, it's really not worth anything. And that's what's happening right now. So my focus has always been on getting more money, the most money we can get to the districts that need it the most. And that's, I think you can tell in this bill, that's what we've sought to do. So, I think as we talk with the Senate, I hope that we have conversations about, I know that's obviously been something that's very important to them. And I think we want to work with them and get to a good product. And I think, y'all know you both were, I don't think you were at Mississippi Today then, but you were both obviously covering the Capitol when we did the teacher pay raise. And that was truly a product of collaboration between the House and the Senate at the end of the day. We had a plan that we thought was great. They had a plan they thought was great. And I think the final product of the two, which came through actual negotiations, and I think the process worked like it should in that case, we got a better bill in the end. So if that's what happens with these two competing proposals, that's a great thing for teachers.
And y'all fought to get there, but y'all got there.
Right, we got there, and we got a great bill at the end. And I think, again, if that's what happens with this, if we have to come together with them and make some changes, that's what, we get a good bill in the end.
Let me ask this sort of before we move on to some specifics. And this may seem like a silly question, but what does, you say districts that need it the most, but what does that mean, and what does inequity mean, and why do you think, equity is an important thing for you and the House to consider?
Yeah, I think, that's a great place to start with this. Mississippi is very unique in that it is very diverse in a lot of ways people don't realize. You can travel 30 minutes down the road and be in a community that looks totally different. And I don't mean demographically. The community actually looks different because of the amount of resources that are available in that community, whether, they be private industry or big projects like we've seen a few this year. Those things look very different from county to county, community to community. So I think in Mississippi, it's very important that we get right, especially the way that we fund our education system now, where there's, a heavy local contribution, but it's capped at a certain number. And I don't want to get too deep into the weeds of all that right now. But the communities that have the students that are in the most high need situations, whether they live in poverty, family doesn't speak English, whatever that may be, those students, by and large, also live in communities that don't have the tax base to fund their public education. So MAP does a little bit to try to rectify that. This bill just goes farther by weighting the money based on the student need itself. So again, it is. I think both formulas probably seek to do the same thing. Ours just goes a little farther to make sure that the communities that have students that don't have resources at home, that also are in those communities that don't have local tax resources to fund education, this kind of bridges that gap for both of those.
Go a little further into that. What you're saying, and correct me, but or add detail to it. There's a base student cost, if you will, and that I forget what it is, but say $6,000. Based on a child's circumstances, that's the school district will get more money to educate that child.
That's right. So the base number is $6,650. So that's the $6,650 is the base amount for every student under this formula. From there, and I should back up. That is based on average daily enrollment. So that's not based on attendance like the current formula. That's something that we've sought to address within MAEP several times. The House has passed that a couple times in the last few years. That was one of my big priorities last term, was to try to switch us to an average daily membership model so that schools are funded based on the number of students enrolled rather than the number that attend. So this formula starts with the $6,650 base student cost based on enrollment. And then from there, there's a variety of weights that are added. There's a 30% weight added for low-income students. So, and we've got a long definition for that in the bill. But that is one of the major factors. And on top of that is an additional weight for what we call concentrated poverty. And that's a district that has, I believe, more than 35% of their students who fall into that low income bracket. They get an additional 10% weight. So that's in our most impoverished communities in the state. They likely, just based on what we know about the districts in Mississippi, they likely have additional financial struggles in that district in having a district population that's so heavily living in poverty. So that's a big weight that, again, the main purpose of that is to help with some of this inequity that I've talked about. That's a big one. There's an additional weight for English language learners. Each different tier, depending on what the student's IEP is, if they're a special needs student, they're weighted on top of the base student cost for that too. A diagnosis in tier 1 gets a 60% additional weight. A diagnosis in tier 2 gets a 125% additional weight. And then tier 3 is 170% additional weight. So that's a big thing we don't do in the current formula. There's really no, we fund special needs based on teacher units right now, which is not really, very few places with states, anybody you talk to would tell you that that's the best practice to fund based on teacher units. You really should fund based on the actual needs of that student, especially for special needs. So this formula, I believe the overall number, just a comparison of what goes into special education under MAEP and what would go under and Inspire, I think there's about twice as much money that's put into the formula for those special education students to educate them, which I think is a huge thing that we have failed the last, as far back as I can look, in funding our special education programs in Mississippi. So this would be a huge step in the right direction for that as well.
Representative McCarty, I know that there is sort of a group of educators that I know would meet that would determine what the base student cost is. Is that right?
So there's I'm glad you mentioned that. There's I guess a panel, for lack of a better word, that is set out in this legislation. They've got a couple different tasks, but it's made up of superintendents. There aren't any political appointees on this panel. It's made up of superintendents from across the state, and it does say in the bill they've got to come from 2 from each of the congressional districts, 1 from the larger 50% of schools, and 1 from the bottom 50% of schools as far as enrollment. So they'll come together, and they actually every 4 years will give us what basically their projected base student cost, their recommendation. At that point, again, because as I mentioned, the way the bill is written, there's a statutory minimum of $6,650. So any change to that, we'd have to do via legislation. So if these superintendents came back and said, we think, they would come back in 4 years with a report and say we think base student cost is this amount, we'd have to adopt that into legislation, or we could always overfund the formula that we created. But obviously, the preference would be to adopt that into statute, the new base student cost. Obviously, it's a recommendation, but again, that's basically what the base unit cost has served as up to this point, for better or worse. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but for all intents and purposes, that's what we've done.
And so, who gets to decide who these like superintendents?
That would
are?
be the Department of Education. So the state superintendent is actually over that committee or panel. He's the lead on it.
Yeah, and this is getting way too far into the weeds. I'm sorry,
know.
no, not your question. What y'all were talking about. My question is, but I think there's 2 State Department of Education officials on the panel, and it seems like y'all made a point in the bill to say State Department of Education employees, not school board members. Am I wrong about that? And who are those members? I mean,
that's one thing.
If that's too far in the weeds, I'm
not
sorry.
Too far. No, it's not too far in the weeds. It's not something we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
with all those other numbers swirling around in my head, it's kind of getting lost. But I believe there were 3 appointees on this from the state superintendent from MDE. But we wanted to make sure again that these are the people on the ground, like boots on the ground, kind of, for lack of a better word, people that would be as close to, without opening up too much. Sometimes I think these things they're too big and you can't get anything done. But we wanted to again keep it with the education professionals that would make that decision and not politicize it, and really not have any influence. I made this comment on the floor, but unless one of us in the legislature is to become a superintendent, which would be a terrible decision for any school board that hires one of us to be the superintendent, there's no way we could be involved in that base unit cost unless we ended up getting hired as a superintendent. And again, boards are smarter than that. They're not going to hire any of us.
So, and I'll drop this, and it's not, but are they identified by position in the bill, the Department of Education?
No, the department appointments are at large, so they could be somebody from within the department. If I remember that correctly.
Yeah. I apologize for.
No, that's fine. All this stuff is very deep in the weeds, again, it makes for very dry podcast work to talk about weights and things like that because it's just not that exciting. But very excited about what it looks like in the end, though.
Yeah, and speaking of that, y'all took action recently to get in the weeds again a little bit. You took the Senate bill. The Senate has a bill that would make some changes to the Zista and Mississippi Adequate Education Program that to address some of the issues that you cited, but I mean I don't think it addresses all of those issues. But y'all took that bill and put your Inspire language into it, and now it goes back to the Senate, where I assume we're going to go to y'all are going to go to conference where and the hope is that of course in conferences that what comes out is better than what either House alluded to, as you said earlier. Do you hope that the Senate will act kind of quickly on that and y'all get them to conference sooner to have more time to work on that?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, if we sent back, as you mentioned, we put our language in their bill and sent it back earlier this week, and I would love if they would invite conference on it, today, we would be excited to get to work on that. I think that's kind of what our move in sending the budget. I mean, we fully funded Inspire in our first House action on our budget. We didn't leave it at LBR. And again, this is way in the weeds, but we sent over our funding mechanism with the money there. We've got 2 different vehicles to pass Inspire with the House bill that's in the Senate now and the Senate bill we've sent back to the Senate. So there's a lot of different routes they can go. The ball's in the Senate's court now. And I think, the sooner, if their intent is to get something done on school funding this session, and I think that it is clear that they want to do that, then the sooner they can invite conference, the better.
Let me ask you this, and I know this is a very sort of an issue that I like to harp on, and that journalists in general love to harp on, and I think we were discussing this yesterday. You mentioned the teacher pay raise bill and negotiations that happened between the House and the Senate. I remember there was a miraculous thing that happened during that, and there was a public conference committee meeting. It was scheduled in advance. The public had, advance notice about it, and lo and behold, I walked in Senate room 216. There were educators there. There were advocacy groups there. There were people interested in the policy, and it allowed people to see the negotiations, the conversations happening between the House and the Senate in a public forum. That very rarely happens in the legislature. And to be fair, a lot of the conference, the bills that go to conference are very dry, and the public would have no interest in them. But I would venture to say that this is something that a lot of people would have a lot of interest in. And you admitted earlier that the conference process allowed for kind of a better product in the end. Do you think that there should be some type of public, open, conference process with this legislation if it does go to conference?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly open to that. I really do believe, and I may be in the very distinct minority on this in the legislature, but I really do think that there are definitely big bills, things like that that benefit from doing that out in front of people. And if you remember during the teacher pay raise, it wasn't the House didn't call the public conference meeting. The Senate did, and I think there was a lot of speculation that we just weren't going to show up. And it made for a lot of drama, which was, the legislature can be really boring, and that was very exciting. It was very,
Sure.
You could say it was good TV, but I certainly think that it made for a better bill, and I think if that's where this conversation needs to go with the Senate to get an agreement on this bill, then I think that is, I'm certainly would be happy to participate in that again.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming you because it's sort of, if you will, maybe above your pay grade, but y'all still having your legislative joint rules that conference committees are supposed to be open.
All official conference committee
Right.
meetings.
Well, and that's
in fairness to y'all, a lot of the conference committees kind of happen on the fly.
That's right.
Yeah, but
And you're one of only 6 conferees.
That's right. And Taylor
this
mentioned
one will
this.
not happen on the fly.
Right.
This would be,
Most bills that go to conference are in conference because there's a reverse repealer in it, and that's the only reason why it's in conference.
Right.
So most conference committees happen, in the hallway. I'll run into somebody in the Senate and say, excuse me, and say, hey, you go with that bill? You want to take the reverse repealer out and move on? And again, I know this is super in the weeds too, but most of the time it really wouldn't add anything to the process to have it out like that. But I think on a big bill where there's obviously a pretty decent divide, if that's what we need to do, then I think that I would certainly be fine with doing that again.
Yeah. And I know you can't predict what the Senate will do, but what would, I guess, be your ideal or sort of realistic compromise that you can reach with the Senate?
I really don't know. I mean, we're not really obviously at that point in the process to know, but I will tell you.
Yeah, what we're asking you to do is tip your negotiation hat.
Yeah.
And I'm not
reveal your cards.
I haven't been doing this that long, but I've been doing it long enough not to do that. But I mean, anything for us, really, that we want to address the distribution problems that I see with MAP. And again, I've said this 1,000 times. I don't have any beef with MAP. I mean, I ran on fully funding MAP. I'm one of those rare cats that's willing to come up here and say, okay, I was not right. I was wrong about what I thought was the problem with this formula and what I thought would fix it. So when I figured that out for myself, I thought, okay, well, what can we do to fix it? And this was our solution to do that. So I want to make sure that we're getting resources where they need to go. And I think there's a lot of districts in the state I know there's a lot of districts in the state that have the local resources to meet their students' needs. And there's a lot that just don't. And you could set their millage rate at 1,000 mills and they wouldn't have enough money to fund their education without substantial state support. So my only goal in this, and the House, and again, the Speaker has been behind this 100%, Chairman Robertson has been behind this 100%. Our goal is to get those districts who could not possibly tax their constituents, their citizens enough to pay for their education, get them where they need to be, where they have the resources to provide a quality education for their students. And that's really all that I'm interested in seeing at the end of the day.
Let me ask you to address, I mean, there's a lot of public education advocates have expressed some reservations about the bill because of the lack of the objective formula that we talked about. And some people have sort of expressed concerns because of the people who are behind the bill. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about some of the groups. Some of the groups were working. I mean, we can go back and forth whether they were working with you or working at the same time you were working, but they kind of came up with the same proposal. And some of those groups in the past have been opponents of just MAEP and said MAEP is full funding. So there's some concern that these groups that have been voucher groups are, there's some concern in public education. These groups are so adamant in supporting this bill now. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'll talk about it very briefly. I think it's not very interesting, and I think most people outside of the Capitol don't care about where things came from. So they care about what the bill does, which I understand where you're getting at with it. But you mentioned they've been opponents of public education. Those groups have been opponents of mine as well. I mean, most of them have spent a decent amount of money against me in elections past. So it's not like we're all singing the Kumbaya together working on this. I think that good policy is good policy, and if everybody in the state likes it, the good groups and the bad, then I'm not going to throw a good bill out because a bad group likes it. But all I can say to that is we worked on this bill in the House. We've tweaked it so many times. We've put feedback from superintendents. The final product doesn't look anything like whatever any of these groups. If there was a proposal from them, I haven't read it. I mean, we put this bill together. So I know there's been a lot of conversation about that, but again, I think that what really matters in this is about getting students the resources they need, and I think that's something that we can all agree. And I think I think education groups have certainly not had that criticism of it. I think they all, as the process has gone along, have seen that this is not about vouchers for us in the House. This is not about anything but equitable funding in education. There's nothing about vouchers in this bill. There are no voucher bills moving through the process right now. The two topics are just not even remotely connected. And I think a lot of people have kind of spun that. And I mean, I'm not for vouchers. I've said before, if the vouchers end up in this bill, I will vote against it, despite the fact that I've put every ounce of my time into it over the last, definitely over the last few months. And it's been something I've been passionate about for much longer than that. So, again, I know that there's been some concern about that. And to those people that are concerned, I would just say, just look at what's in the bill and look at what we're trying to do with the bill and block out all this other noise, because I'm telling you, there's nothing in this bill that a public education advocate, someone who's passionate about giving resources to our neediest public schools, there's nothing in this bill that they should be scared of.
Now for the toughest question. What does INSPIRE stand for?
That, honestly, I have no idea. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be fully honest. I mean, I can tell you, I got my notes right here, but I am not the acronym king. We had an internal acronym for this that was kind of a joke that accidentally made it into like the original file of the bill. That was Mufasa, which was a much more technical name. Obviously, that was not supposed to be the official title of the bill. But the INSPIRE, the acronym people are. I'm not the acronym people.
Yeah, well, it's funny.
Well, I hope you're probably hoping that the fate of this bill will not meet the same fate as Mufasa in The Lion King,
which is why we changed the name. Yes,
it's funny because one of the criticisms through the years of the Mississippi Adequate Education Program is the name of the program. Well, who wants adequate schools? Who wants
right? We want inspiring schools, which is what the name means to me.
And since you told that joke about told that thing about yourself, I tell one on me that's kind of embarrassing. And one of the stories I was writing about the bill, early in the story, I did spell out the I forget what it is too, the name of the bill, and then I started calling it INSPIRE. But throughout the story, I called it Ensure. but fortunately, good editors caught that before.
I was going to say I didn't catch that, so someone caught it before it went out.
I was very thankful to that editor that day.
All right. Well, Representative McCarty, thank you for joining us. I think this is your first time on the podcast.
It is.
I
is.
hope it won't be the last time that we can continue these conversations in the future.
Yeah, we need to start having parting gifts.
That's right.
Thank y'all so much. Yeah, I appreciate it. Absolutely.
As we cover the biggest political stories in the state, you don't want to miss an episode of The Other Side. We'll bring you more reporting from every corner of the state, sharing the voices of Mississippians and how they are impacted by the news. So what do we need from you, the listener? We need your feedback and support. If you listen to the podcast on a player like iTunes or Stitcher, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review. We also have an email in which you can share your feedback. That address is podcast@MississippiToday.org. Y'all can also reach out to me or any of my colleagues through social media or email. And as always, thank you for your feedback and support. Subscribe to our weekly podcast on your favorite podcast app or stream episodes online at mississippitoday.org/theotherside. For the Mississippi Today team, I'm Adam Ganeshow. The Other Side is produced by Mississippi Today and engineered by Blue Sky Studios. We hope you'll join us for our next episode.